Mark and Sue, please join me on stage. I'm going to basically exit the stage. Sue Desmond-Hellmann is CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is the largest pool of capital ever assembled for philanthropy. And before being at the Gates Foundation, she was chancellor of University of California at San Francisco, UCSF, and helped create one of the greatest, turned it into a really great research university, some of whose faculty we saw earlier today quite impressively.
Over 4 years.
Created an incredible children's hospital, and Mark donated $200 million for that. One of the reasons they're so well acquainted. Mark is Salesforce CEO, a good friend of Techonomy, and I'm really happy to turn it over to him to interview Sue or to do whatever else he does, whatever the two of you do together. I'm sure will be interesting. I'll be in the vicinity, don't worry. You just go for it, and I'll see what I have to do to get back up here.
Okay, thank you, David. And what we'd like to do here, as I guess we're batting a cleanup here at the end, which David has had me do now twice in his conference. I don't really know why, but
You're not boring.
I'm not boring, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to ask Sue a few questions, then try to turn it over to all of you to ask her a few questions. But anyway, I have a whole bunch of questions that I have prepared for you, but I am not...
He hasn't shown me these, by the way.
Here they are, actually. You can look at them, because I'm probably not going to use them. But number one, you know, in the last panel we heard this really kind of interesting comment, which was that it's more important right now to tell Silicon Valley to work on elder care than on digital health. And you know, it seemed to me like that was a very interesting juxtaposition, and I kind of understand where that comment is coming from, but what's your perspective of that? Where are we today on digital health and kind of the combining of my industry and your industry coming together? What is happening?
Well, I understand the comment, and I think the spirit of the comment is that if you look at what's really happening now, and the context of that comment was today where there's enormous debate in life sciences, is this a bubble?
They were also denigrating my Fitbit, which I did not appreciate.
You're wearing.
Yeah.
But right now there's a lot of talk about whether or not we're in a bubble, and inarguably on the therapeutic side, if you look at therapeutics in my area in cancer product development with the cancer immunotherapy that was talked about in that panel as well, it is so exciting. And we're talking about cures. We're talking about amazing, magnificent cures for diseases we've never been able to touch before. And so the advances in hepatitis, the advances in cancer, the serious advances in things, rheumatic diseases, these are real and patients are benefiting. So that doesn't feel like a bubble. On the other hand, in the digital health area, there's a lot of talk, a lot of companies, and in terms of either really clear benefit to people who aren't sick or people who are sick, so either patient benefit or societal benefit, or frankly business model. Is somebody really making money at scale off digital health? It just feels a lot harder. So I think that there is reasonable people can criticize digital health. My friend Bob Wachter, who I know you know, just wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and what Bob talked about was how much clinicians in the hospital hate electronic health records. And there's famous cartoons where the doctor is shown with a parent there and the doctor turned the other way, typing frantically in the computer, not looking at the child or the parent. So electronic health records haven't brought a lot of...
Not at UCSF, I hope.
Never at UCSF, you and I know that. But the electronic health records haven't yet demonstrated the promise all of us hoped for.
Is that the problem, though, is that we think about digital health as EMR? Because when it's really not. When, we really are You know, we're at an incredible threshold with the whole concept of data. And we just haven't invested enough, whether it's at UCSF or probably maybe any institution that I know, in data. I know there was a speaker this morning, Richard Socher, is doing very exciting work in deep learning, and he wanted to be able to take a series of scans. It could be mammograms, it could be, you know, some other type of some other type of image, and be able to kind of run those images at scale and be able to use his service to predict, you know, or to guide or assist a radiologist in determining what was on the screen that they were looking at. You know, a very good use case, actually, for data.
Yeah. And
we can't do it because we don't have, you know, banks of standardized images that have been created in specialized ways with the right level of annotation that gives us the ability to use kind of what is very strong artificial intelligence and deep learning software that should give us kind of this predictive capability, but we can't do it. So is the issue data? Is the issue that we're too, you know, we were a very EMR-centric. What are we looking at?
Well, I think there's a couple things that came through today really clearly. One is that we have to have some shared understanding of the data elements. We have to have some common data elements, just like the kinds of common data elements that have made the Internet possible. We have to have those elements, and a Global Alliance for Precision Medicine is now starting to look at data and the way we put data in databases. So I think some of that language issue.
We're not going to have precision medicine without standardized data,
We have to have standardized data, and so I think
lots of it.
Lots of standardized data put into shared databases, and even using the term sharing is something that increasingly is important to make precision medicine come real. But I think there's another thing, and that is the regulatory underpinnings of this. What we need to protect the quality and the believability and the confidence people have in health, while balancing something that came up in the issue about who owns your data.
Right.
It's my data,
sure,
but when you make a claim that you can teach me something about my data, that's regulated.
Sure.
So the importance of regulation and data elements and a common language can't be overstated.
And there's one other element, actually, which is like, you know, when someone like Richard, who has like this platform, goes to an institution like UCSF, and, you know, UCSF either takes, you can go to prostate cancer, and okay, they have you know, all these rectal ultrasounds, but then they also have all this pathology, okay, and you know, this type of technology can work on either one. Now you run the server, it looks at all this, it comes up with a conclusion. Oh, you guys haven't really checked this. Look at this. When this happens, then that's true. Who owns that? Right. I mean, that's a third construct that is we're creating new data.
Right, and making sure that that's valuable, because in the end, an entrepreneur needs something to sell. So is there value in diagnostics? Is there value in data analysis? Is there value in connecting those dots and looking at different ways that people can create that value? Having a regulatory system and a payment system that will pay for that value is part of it.
So when we talk about precision medicine, does that also need to include this conversation on data as well?
It must include the conversation on data.
It does feel like sometimes when we talk about precision medicine, we default into genomics. And we're not circling in all the other aspects that are going to really, precision medicine is going to really require, which is a lot of other data sets besides the genomic data sets.
That's right. Well, one of the most powerful things that I think all of us see in medicine, and the speaker who was here before you and I was talking about mental health. I was happy to co-chair the National Academy of Sciences report on precision medicine in 2010 with Charles Sawyers from Memorial Sloan Kettering. And what Charles and I did with our committee is we talked about all the data elements, including behavioral science. So people really being able to look at behavior, environment, using mapping. Mapping is an incredibly powerful tool that we underuse in medicine. And so when you take all those things together with genomics, because people hear precision medicine and think genetics or genomics, but it's the entire panoply of data.
We saw that with Apple's Health Kit announcement, or their Research Kit, or whatever they call it, where they're generating all this new data based on apps that are running on mobile devices that are profiling people in real time, so people might not even know they're walking around with their phone and their physical and mental health is being profiled.
Right. No,
that's quite unusual.
It is both powerful and scary. I learned something about data in Silicon Valley that made me smile. So as part of working at the Gates Foundation, we were asked to help out with Ebola. Really scary, really a tremendously big challenge that remains a huge challenge to West Africa and was thought for a while to be a potential challenge for the globe. And so I talked to a lot of my friends in Silicon Valley about what was needed. And one of the key things we needed was improved systems globally for disease surveillance.
Right.
Well, if you're in Silicon Valley, you don't want to use the word surveillance after NSA. So I started to call it disease tracking. So disease tracking is what we need help with, and that is using all these systems to look at where index cases of important epidemics happen.
But again, that's just one data set. That's just one data.
One asset called data.
That's just one spoke on the wheel, right?
Right.
Because there's genomics, it's proteomics, it's the labs, it's the pathology, it's the scans, the images. I mean, we could keep going down on and on and on. And all these data sets today do not really take into consideration that one day there would be advancements on the information sciences. And I keep saying that I think that, pretty soon we're going to see that information scientists are the ones who are going to really start to have the big breakthroughs on the biological sciences. Do you think that's going to, is that true, do you think? Or do you think that, we're not at that point?
I think we're at that point and more. Today, the immense power that a clinician, that a researcher, or that an educator has in using data, if I compare now to when I went to medical school, it's unbelievable how much you can learn on the fly about anything. I can be literally in the middle of Ethiopia, and I can use Google Scholar, and I can look up something, and in an incredibly powerful way, I can learn that, I can apply that, I can ask the right questions. When I was in medical school, I mean, we didn't know half of the molecular biology that's known today, and I would go to the library and find a book, which I now realize was all outdated the day I looked at it in text. So the information cycle, the information turns we can use, and part of that is how we learn, how we communicate, how we collaborate, are all vastly different and changing and improving all the time. It's exciting to see that, and it's exciting to see the kind of things that we saw today. And I think the most powerful thing, and it's evidenced by some people making connections here, is when you hear something and a light bulb goes off because you didn't know until you saw online or connecting with people what was possible in a different space.
Yeah. Now
That's all about data.
Well, you're really hitting that. We're to make these advancements happen, we need a much greater interdisciplinary skill set than ever before.
In ways that until I started a year ago at the Gates Foundation, even at UCSF, where it was interdisciplinary, when I talked interdisciplinary, it was the dentist talking to the doctors or the nurses talking to the pharmacists. Now for me, interdisciplinary is I really want to understand people who think about roads. I want to think about city planning. How do you decide how streets are laid out? How do you decide where farms are? The kinds of questions that are important to me now, and when I think about interdisciplinary, it is much broader and more powerful than the healthcare team, which is powerful in and of itself.
Now there's a juxtaposition against that, because we talked about kind of what Carl June has done with this kind of T-cell therapy, and what that potentially could do. That's still not prime time, right? It's still pretty bespoke. We still have, I think about my own world at Salesforce. we had 3 employees die last year of glioblastomas. And that when you get that phone call, at UCSF we have a great program with Mitch Berger, and it's great to refer somebody into the best care possible, but that's a diagnosis that you just don't want today. And maybe that T-cell therapy will get there on that diagnosis, but today that's not where we are.
So here's the thing I'm excited about, and let me tell you a rich world application and a poor world application. So you use the word bespoke. Mm-hmm. I think that's a word that sounds expensive, that sounds futuristic, and if you, like me, want to scale things, it sounds nearly impossible. But the work that was cited before that Carl June and others are doing to customize immunotherapy for cancer today is bespoke, but what I like about being able to cure people is everything's possible if you can cure people. So it's bespoke today, but what if we make that a precision medicine remedy? Mm-hmm. Well, it may be bespoke for a number of patients. It may be bespoke in the way that you have to manufacture it in small little cell cultures. But what if you could do that, and instead of doing it ex vivo, what if you could do it in vivo? What if I could do it in you? So it's bespoke if it has to be done in ways that our manufacturing and the way we do it now is more a research tool than something you do every day. It's the difference between doing a bone marrow transplant and an autologous stem cell transplant. That was incredibly difficult, incredibly expensive. It's still expensive and difficult, but it can be done at scale and is done globally now. So I think the things that are being done in cancer immunotherapy, while bespoke and special and precise, could be scalable and should be scalable. And if the cure rates are what I hope they'll be, mm-hmm. they will be scalable. Now,
is that a 10-year vision or a 20-year vision or a 30-year vision?
Oh, I think it's a 10-year vision. I think we're on the brink in cancer immunotherapy.
Because it's been 40 years of molecular biology, and we haven't had that breakthrough yet. So
it's been 40 years in the desert. So I think it's good to be skeptical, mm-hmm. but there are human beings today mm-hmm. who I never thought we would be talking about lung cancer, mm-hmm. some most difficult leukemias, mm-hmm. where the results are nothing less than spectacular. So I think that it isn't, my opinion, not hype. Now talk about a poor country. So if you're in a poor country and you have an epidemic and you don't have a vaccine ready, you wish you had a bespoke vaccine, right? We all know the flu vaccine this year wasn't what we wanted it to be. What if instead of customizing a vaccine every single time we have a new pathogen, what if you could make bespoke vaccines, because vaccine technology, vaccinology was such that when we have a new pathogen, we could rapidly make a new one. So everything about how we make, discover, innovate, and manufacture vaccines could be faster and more low cost. Now that's today bespoke, but if you do that at scale, what Ebola taught us and what the threat of global pandemic flu teaches us over and over again is we need to have more rapid product development, and it's bespoke in the sense that each pathogen is different.
So is that what's slowing us down? Is it this product cycle just is not fast enough?
The product cycle is way too slow.
I mean, you know that, right, from your time at
Genentech, we learned that.
Mm-hmm.
I gave a talk to people right before I left Genentech and I was serious. Knowing that I was going to go back to academia, the talk was about Herceptin. And the talk was about mm-hmm. Bishop and Varmus, the discovery mm-hmm. of HER2, the oncogene, mm-hmm. Dennis Slayman's work. He published in the late 80s, and we had Herceptin approved in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. So doing the math, I'm not that old, but I could see 2 more Herceptins in my lifetime.
Right.
That's awful. That's not good enough.
Right.
So
you had a similar...
It can't be a 20-year horizon.
You have a similar story with Avastin as well, right? I mean, that's one of your great success stories.
That's right. It has to go faster. Has to go faster.
Concretely, can I jump in? Okay. Concretely, what are you doing at the Gates Foundation about that? I think, I'd like to just hear specifically things that maybe you've put additional emphasis on since you got there, or Talk about the foundation's actual work right now.
So the foundation's got three major areas of focus. One that you read about a lot in the U.S., which is U.S. education. We do education K through 12 and post-secondary only in the U.S. The second one is global health, what you would normally in a company call R&D, all about innovation. And the third is global development. And so global development is getting that last kilometer, getting that last 100 kilometers. For example, our polio eradication program is in global development. We have a vaccine. We have 2 vaccines that work. We just need to get them to people. So what we're doing in a tangible way to solve these problems, we love vaccines. Vaccines are, for poor people, vaccines are a beautiful thing. For the globe, vaccines are a beautiful thing. They have a great return on investment. They're very cost effective.
Evidently in Marin County, though, vaccines are not a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that. So we're investing in companies. We're investing in companies that are using RNA in completely new ways. We're investing in companies that I'm really excited about, where you say, gee, recombinant DNA technology and the science of biotechnology requires big factories like Genentech's factory out in Vacaville or Amgen's factories down in Thousand Oaks. Well, the science of biotechnology is using mammalian cells as factories, Chinese hamster ovaries. Why can't I use your muscle as a factory? So instead of ex vivo making a product, what if I inject a plasmid and you become your own factory for a vaccine? That's not crazy. So we're really interested in scalable, novel ways to look at rapid turnaround. And what if you skipped the entire ex vivo process?
Right.
So is this the next generation of the Gates Foundation that you see yourself doing this type of funding?
So we're now increasingly, we have 2 different areas in the Gates Foundation that I think are under-recognized in R&D. One is product development partnerships. So we'll partner with anyone from a tiny lab in academia where something great is going on to GlaxoSmithKline and Sanofi and Merck, because we really care about great product development that's solving problems in vaccine development. We're collaborating with a number of diagnostic companies. Diagnostics are a huge, huge problem globally. I would say they're a problem in rich countries as well as poor countries. What's a scalable, rapid throughput diagnostic approach? And then we have product development investments. So we're actually investing in companies and just made a big investment in a company to look at a completely novel way of understanding the immune system. So if we have insights into immunology, we could make better vaccines. If you take a 3-dose vaccine and make it into 2 doses, that's an extraordinarily powerful thing for compliance. So those are the kinds of investments you'll see the Gates Foundation make.
The Gates Foundation also does a bunch of other stuff. And you were talking before about thinking holistically. Is there any way you're sort of trying to think of the healthcare work of the Gates Foundation in combination with or kind of mashed up with the work in education and other things? Or is that just sort of a stupid question? I don't know.
It's not a stupid question at all. One of the most powerful things that I've recognized since being at the foundation is how much across the various projects we have, there's shared learning. So I'll give you an example. We have a huge investment in global agriculture at the Gates Foundation. We invest in smallholder farmers, and the vision is to double farm productivity so Africa could feed itself. That's a great vision. That's a really great vision, and that's a powerful thing. We have a big nutrition program because we don't want children to go hungry, to die, or to have stunting and have less opportunity in their life as a result of malnutrition. And we have a maternal and child health program that thinks about things like breastfeeding. So for those projects to work across...
And preterm birth.
We have a huge investment in preterm birth with Mark and Lynn. There are so many learnings that one project has that are applicable to another. So I heard about something today that I thought there's an opportunity. So we have a water, sanitation, and hygiene program. And part of our water, sanitation, and hygiene program is attempting to do something we've seen with cell phones. So most people in poor countries never had a landline. There was a leapfrogging right straight to cell phones. People skip landlines in sub-Saharan Africa, largely skip landlines. So most poor cities don't have sewer systems. So we would love to see a leapfrogging so that countries go from cities that are just horrible, and all of us have been in those very poor cities that don't have sewer systems. If we invest in toilet and processor technology, what if you leapfrog the sewer system and have omniprocessors that process human waste and come up with renewables?
Yeah.
Well, what I thought about today is, what if you could make a brick out of that? Maybe there's something there. I'm not kidding. These bio bricks were really interesting to me. So there's a lot of things that are going on that I think people in Silicon Valley don't hear about. Problems we're trying to solve that are really basic. Water, sanitation, vaccines, the opportunity for a woman to have access to modern family planning. Our goal is 120 million more women will have access to modern contraception by 2020. Wow. So all these are problems we're working on, but the people who we're trying to serve make less than $1.25 a day. So the solutions have to be appropriate and scalable for people who meet that criteria.
Definitely want to hear from the audience, but I wanted to ask you, Mark, explain the thing you just described before, this maternal thing, and how, is that something part of UCSF that you're now working at Gates, or is that something separate? And I'd also like you to explain why it is that you got so excited about UCSF when she was running it, that you made some of the biggest philanthropic gifts ever in healthcare or in almost any field, $200 million gifts. Talk a little bit about why this area engages you and what you're doing in it.
Well, I read the New Yorker magazine, and there's this great writer, Atul Gawande. I'm sure everyone has read his articles. And he wrote a great article called Slow Ideas, which basically talked about how we know a lot about how to kind of deal with preterm birth. If a preterm birth happens, we know how to increase survival rates. We don't know a lot about why preterm birth happens, which is amazing. Gates Foundation has done an amazing job in one huge contribution to the whole world, which is the number of kids that die under 5 years old has been dramatically reduced.
Gone down by half.
Because of immunization, mostly.
From 12 to 6. So from 12 million to 6 million. Of the 6 million, about half of those that die, I think, I might not have the data exactly right, are in the preterm birth category. So, I put those two things together where I'm reading the article. I'm also listening to Bill and Melinda and reading their reports. And I'm like, well, why are we not working on this 3 million? So I had a conversation with Bill about it, and he was not as interested. So I appealed to Melinda, and she was very interested in it. And I said, I'll put up 50 million, you put up 50 million, and we'll create the first global preterm birth center at UCSF. There's never been a global preterm birth center.
What a nice synthesis of things, yes.
Well, there's never been a global preterm birth center before in the world. There's not which is kind of this bizarre thing to me that, what happens is, even at UCSF, if your child is born preterm, they take you as the parent, they put you in the NICU, they say take your shirt off and put your child on your chest, and that's called kangaroo care. But kangaroo care, that seems pretty simple, pretty low tech, but dramatically increases survival rates that the child kind of feels, either the epigenetics or whatever the thing is, whatever it happens,
that's
it's like
epigenetics.
whatever you've taught me. But all of a sudden the child's like, oh, I have a reason, to survive. I've got somebody protecting me, and I'm going to go for it. So that's one thing. We don't even do that well with kangaroo care in the United States, much less in the parts of the world where she and her husband spend a huge amount of time. And you take that, or you take steroids. The other thing they're going to do is if you're about to have a preterm birth, they're going to shoot you with some steroids to develop the baby's lungs. That's another huge survival opportunity. And that is something that's not well done in the United States, and not hard to get those steroids out into the field, the last mile, all the great things that Gates has done. How do we get those steroids out in stock so that they're ready to go if there's a preterm birth? Now, if there's a lot of other issues on survivability, preterm birth survival rates, and then cost of and implications of children who come out of a preterm birth situation. That's a whole nother track. We're just talking about getting through and increasing the survival rates and creating that healthy child. Number 3 is now we don't know why preterm birth happens. So how about this thing called research, which our federal government seems to have a lot of problems doing by cutting back NIH, cutting back NSF. Sue was just at the White House with the president talking about, all the cuts that have happened over the last 3 or 4 administrations just in basic research. So it's the role of philanthropists to come in and to say, okay, let's do some basic research now just on this. And if we want to drive, and I think Bill Gates and Melinda Gates' vision of driving down the death rates of children under 5 years old is very worthy. And so here's this next piece. So that's how that I'd already put in the money with Sue on the Children's Hospital. That's now up and operational in San Francisco. We have the second one underway in Oakland. This is the third piece. The total program is $250 million. But the third piece is preterm birth, which I think is a really key piece. And, it's coming out of, what we're talking about. There's a lot of other things.
What's nice is that what Mark and Lynn and Bill and Melinda enabled is really a first of its kind program that looks at preterm birth as a global issue. So it's an issue in Oakland. It's an issue.
Oh, it's a huge issue in Oakland.
It's a huge issue UCSF Children's Hospital in Oakland. In every community in America, it's an issue, and it's an issue in poor countries. Wow. So thinking about the different environments that you're operating in as a clinician or a researcher, and really looking at the biology of preterm birth, which is poorly understood, is a huge opportunity.
Well, that was more interesting than I even expected.
Thank you, David.
I want to. Go ahead. Let's hear some audience people. We don't really have to end on time here, thankfully. Let's back here. Take the mic. Identify yourself.
Thurl Timpson at Mendel's Pod. Mark, is this an interview strategy, or are you really this down on bio?
What's that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
you mean up?
Am I real? Oh, am I when I was challenging her?
Right.
Yeah. I challenge her because, look, the reality is there's a lot of exciting things that are happening.
Well, this is in a different session?
Just right now, the reality is that, number one, there is a lot of exciting stuff happening in the world in biotech and in information technology. Mm-hmm. And these two things are accelerating. So we have a huge acceleration in tech, period, bioinformation, whatever. Okay. And what we want is in my opinion, what needs to happen is we want those two things to come together a little bit more so that we get that breakthrough, Just going out and getting your gene sequenced is not necessarily going to help you live a longer, healthier life. Right? Am I right?
Right.
Have you had your gene sequence?
I have not had my gene sequence.
You have not had your gene sequence. So here she is, she has not had her gene sequence. That's a pretty big statement.
And I'm here to tell the story.
So, but let me finish. Which is, I have to answer the question.
I know you do. I'm waiting to hear the answer.
And the point is that information technology and biotechnology have made huge strides and gains over the last 3 or 4 decades. We need to bring those two sciences together, I think, to get to the next big breakthrough. That was my kind of take on where digital health actually, I think, is the link. But the reality is that in the big killers in the United States, and if you go to UCSF and you end up in prostate cancer, and brain cancer, and breast cancer, we're getting modest increases in survivability in some of these things, but we're still waiting for the big leap forward where we have the commercial application where we can say, or Sue can say, when you walk in, oh yeah, here's the great new T-cell therapy on glioblastoma or she said HER2, you get in HER2, we're still, yes, she did a great job with that drug that she went through, okay? But the HER2 world is not where you want to be today, and we haven't had that breakthrough. So that's where I'm like just in reality that as someone who has a large employee base, and I get calls every single day, this employee has, this issue or that issue or whatever. The reality is that, hey, we have some great treatment, and there's no place you'd rather be than UCSF, believe me, on all those 3 cancers specifically.
Yeah.
But because of the work she did. But the reality is we're still waiting. It's not good enough, and we're still waiting for the big breakthroughs. And I hope she's right that she turns my body into a lab, and I'm going to start spitting out, God knows what. But we're not totally there.
But
that's my point.
I think Mark's skepticism is appropriate.
And I think information technology is the answer.
Because I've spent so much time on precision medicine, I think the gap between where we are and where Mark is pushing us, which is why I've always loved working with Mark, because he's pushing us, is twofold. One is this link between information technology and life sciences is kind of pitiful. I mean, it just feels like we're just at the start of it, but we have so much more that we can do and should do. And when I was writing the precision medicine report, I made the difference between thinking about a patient with type 2 diabetes today and what we can tell them about our deep understanding of the biology versus my ability to use Google Maps when I come out of BART and want to walk anywhere in San Francisco. And it's constantly adjusted and updated and everything else. It just makes me crazy. Or that I don't have to go to a bank, but I have to go to the doctor to do everything. So those 2 worlds are just, I think when people see what's possible in daily life with information technology that's not possible in health, it's frustrating. And even more frustrating when you're somebody like Mark who cares deeply about his employees. And if you've had a couple employees with a brain cancer, it's staring you in the face that our best just isn't good enough.
Another example is, let's say you go in and you're a woman getting your normal mammogram treatment, and you're going in and there's a you have your scan. The first thing they have to do is, or the doctor's probably going to say to you, your UCSF or maybe someplace, I know the perfect radiologist to bring in on this. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
Yeah.
I know this person, I got the person who's going to really read the scan, don't worry. Oh, you have the CT scan? I've got the person to bring in the scan. That is pretty crazy in 2015, in my opinion, based on what we know about the information sciences, that we still have lexicons like that in major universities. I think that is where the big advancements can come. And that's on my mind. It's weird, I think, really weird.
Hi, I'm Diane Weiser with W2O Group. I actually had the pleasure of working with Sue and her team on the public relations launch of Avastin. So it's great to see you. But just on the personalized medicine front, I'm interested in your take on Roche's recent investment in Foundation Medicine, and if you think that is the convergence that we're looking for in terms of the genomic side and the pharma biotech side. Did they get that right? Are we going to see more of that? And, what does that future look like?
And explain it, please.
Well, I can't say what was behind the scenes at Roche because I'm not at Genentech anymore, but I think that what you see with companies like Roche and their investment in Foundation Medicine is the recognition that the best medicine in the future will all be precision medicine, so that you have access to the best possible information about the drivers of that person's illness, about what you'd like to dial up and down at scale. And particularly in cancer, this is true, but increasingly it's true beyond cancer. And that any patient, any clinician, any care team will want as much information as possible on the precise nature of that illness and what that patient needs, the right therapy at the right time, and in combination and adjusted up and down. And so I think when you look at the companies that do that well, they deal with complexity, they deal with data, and they have a feedback loop, which is really hard to do in real life in the clinic, that is just on time for the clinician for decision making. It's because if it's not actionable, it may as well not even be there. It doesn't matter if it's not actionable.
Let me give you a story on that specific topic, which is that I have a friend of mine who has brain cancer. He has a glioblastoma, and he's had surgery twice to reduce the size of the tumor. And on the second time, he's being operated on in a rural hospital. I said to the neurosurgeon, who's a very good neurosurgeon, actually graduated from UCSF, which is, I found the surgeon for my friend, and I said, okay, well, are we going to type this cancer? So when we basically said, we did, she hasn't sequenced her genes, but sequencing cancer is pretty cool. And by the way, how did we get to where we are with Ebola? We sequenced it, which was the Broad folks sequenced. They used that sequencing technology to figure out what was going on with Ebola. So the sequencing technology is amazing. And then I said, why don't we get Foundation Medicine to sequence your cancer and see what's going on? And I had to push and prod and be the patient advocate that Sue would say that I had to be for my friend, and got the Foundation Medicine to sequence his cancer, and we found a marker that we can do exactly what she said, dial up. We don't need it yet, thank God, but at some point in the future he's going to have a life extension because of a biomarker that we found that we know that we can adjust with an FDA-approved product. Wow. So that is why I think companies like Foundation Medicine and other companies that are doing that type of sequencing work on cancers is very important.
Question this side of the room, David.
Hi, Ellen Jorgensen from GenSpace Community Biolab. There's been a lot of talk recently about how one of the things that slows down the pace of biomedical research is that the current systems don't reward people for sharing data in real time. So the IP system, tenure systems. Is the Gates Foundation doing anything? First of all, do you think that is a real problem? And second of all, is the Gates Foundation doing anything about that?
Yes, and we recently announced we have an open access publication policy that we've just put in place, so we're giving people a glide path, but we definitely both believe in open access, and then when we make investments, we also are looking to the people who we're funding to make sure that if they have tiered pricing strategies or low cost for poor countries, that we can use that. One of the really beautiful things is the use of new tools. So one of my favorite tools is a volume guarantee. So if someone's making a new vaccine and they can get it at a certain cost and quality, we'll backstop them. So we'll say we'll use our capital to ensure them. We think it'll get bought by countries and ministries of health and the like, but we can actually guarantee that. So not only sharing data, your point, but anything we can do to get products and product development done for the poor at scale, that's in our wheelhouse.
I have to ask something about that. Is it pathetic that a private philanthropy has to be in the position of doing that? Why shouldn't governments be doing that? I mean, wouldn't we be better off if we had governments that figured that stuff out and were actually doing it at a global... The UN should be doing that, right? I mean, it's a great thing the Gates Foundation exists, but...
Yeah, everything we do is in collaboration, so we often do funding. The countries where we've worked in most successfully, I'll give you two examples, India and Ethiopia, we're working very closely with the government, with the ministries, and with the states. In India, it's not one country. We're working in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh with those states. There's about 300 million people living in poverty. So we definitely work with governments. We work with ministries of health. What we're trying to solve is often, and in those cases, it's not a government failure, it's a market failure. So the markets don't work when people can't see a return on investment. So if we can use our capital to create the conditions where the markets can work, we think that's a scalable solution, but we do that in the best cases in collaboration with government.
And I think that, government's role in basic research cannot be overstated. That's number one. Right. That our government needs to step it way up on NIH and NSF funding. These things are mission critical for my industry, for her industry, and our company would not exist without the basic research that happened 30, 40 years ago, sponsored by the federal government. And that's true
on
for
the internet.
Industry.
You mean to create the internet?
Yeah, and also what the U.S. government has done, and that's why we have great universities here. But that's not true for all countries. we,
no
the United
investments
States,
in
this is pretty
biomedicine.
unique
Yeah.
that the United States has funded so much basic research. If you go around the world, you're not going to see, I don't think, an analog. I don't know, which country would you say is number 2 in terms of the amount of basic research that's been done?
Well, traditionally, the UK has been a terrific supporter of basic research, but keep your eye on China.
Can we keep going, Simone? Where's Simone? Yeah? A little longer, okay. A few more questions, comments?
Good comment.
Nobody's got a question?
Okay, wrap it up, David.
I'm not ready. I can't believe...
Has this conference met your expectations, David?
He's going to start asking you questions.
Oh, he did this to me last time. I better wrap it up now. I give a lot of credit to Alex standing back there. I feel like we had a really interesting program today, and so it did, actually. Yeah. And this has been a fantastic session, and let's keep it going a little longer with one more person back there.
Good evening, Mark and Sue. My name is Vince from Design Innovators. My question is, Mark, as you're such a deep, caring, personality, what is one thing you can actually be a role of philanthropic person at a very young age? Or how can you inspire youngsters in Silicon Valley to be more philanthropic?
Yeah, well, I do that. I slap a lot of guys.
Yeah, you hit a nerve with that question.
In terms of, I feel like that's a very important role for me. That one of the things that UCSF this year will raise about $550 million in philanthropy, and I think, if we were 5 years ago, if Sue and I were in her office, on Parnassus Avenue, and I was telling her that we'd be raising $550 million, she would be like, saying it's not possible. And we've had a huge shift, and a lot of that has come out of Silicon Valley, where you can look that, this new building that we opened is not just a great children's hospital, but it's a great women's hospital, which is Gordon and Betty Moore, the founders of Intel, have been involved. The great cancer hospital, Barbara Bass-Baker. You've got Brooke Byers Hall across. You've got Genentech Hall. You've got a lot of very exciting. Ron Conway just put in $40 million. And a lot of these young CEOs, our messages to them is, hey, just don't build great products, build great tech companies. And the way to build a great company is to build a company that's not just about your shareholder, but about your stakeholder. And one of the key stakeholders in today's world is our communities. And, we are trying to pivot and open the hearts of these entrepreneurs as they generate huge amounts of personal wealth and also wealth for their employees and shareholders, to push that wealth into great institutions like UCSF or the Gates Foundation as well, and also to not only use their money, which is very important, but also their employees. We have 5,000 of our 16,000 employees are in downtown San Francisco. A huge amount of volunteerism goes on at UCSF or through the public schools. That's very important. And number 3 is we run over 25,000 nonprofits and NGOs for free in our data centers, which is, takes up about between 1% and 2% of our revenue, which is, very aggressive. But that's been our mission from the beginning, and it's part of our 1-1-1 program, which is, 1% of our employees' time, 1% of our profit, and 1% of our equity goes to back into the community. And so this is, I think, very important. I don't think you can have a successful company today without having a message that you're also giving back. And a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, feel a level of pressure on them to have a program, and maybe 5 or 10 years ago they didn't, and the beneficiaries should be organizations like this and others, some represented in this room, who need the support of organizations like ours. And when I work with young entrepreneurs who are starting companies, my message to them is, and I try to model it for them, that if you want to build a company, multi-billion-dollar company with a huge valuation, build a great company. And a great company is not just a culture of free food. That used to be like, oh, well, we have a cafeteria, so that's, makes us a great company. That must make us a Fortune #1 best place to work because we have free food and we have whatever, dry cleaning on site. to a company that really is doing great things in the world and that is not only building great products but also deeply integrated with their communities. And that is what will create a great company, and that's what I'm trying to model for these next-gen entrepreneurs. I hope that answers your question.
That was a good way to end, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.